السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. فالحمد لله والحمد لله الذي خلق فسوى وأعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى. لا مانع لما أعطى ولا معطي لما منع. ألا له الخلق والأمر تبارك الله. والجماد ينطق حاله ما من إله إلا الله. وأصلي وأسلم على النبي المصطفى المجتبى وعلى آله الفضلاء وأصحابه النجباء ومن تبعهم ووالاهم إلى يوم الجزاء. أما بعد فيقول الله تبارك وتعالى يعلمون ظاهرا من الحياة الدنيا وهم عن الآخرة هم غافلون. وقال تعالى فأعرض عمن تولى عن ذكرنا ولم يرد إلا الحياة الدنيا ذلك مبلغهم من العلم إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بمن اهتدى. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لتتبعن سنن من كان قبلكم شبرا بشبر وذراعا بذراع حتى لو سلكوا جحر ضب لسلكتموه أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. We start by praising Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. We thank Him for His mercy for having guided us. Had He not guided us, we surely would have not been guided. And that guidance that He has given us, this is the greatest of blessings. And so we thank Allah Ta'ala for that. We thank Him for gathering us on the blessed day of Jumu'ah to uphold that guidance. And we ask Him to send His blessings upon the Ummah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as well as the blessed Prophet, Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself and his companions and his family members. Dear brothers and sisters, the human being, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, when speaking of the human being, we learned that the human being is more than just a biological specimen. The human being is more than just a biological specimen, that his innate biology is what is judging him and what is making choices. And beyond that, it's just the brain giving illusions, as some modern neurologists may assume. Rather, we believe that Allah Ta'ala created the human being and He gifted the human being certain faculties, certain powers, certain capabilities, which differentiates that human being from other creations. And that human being having been given his innate biology, but at the same time being given a mind, being given an aql, which is beyond just the brain, right? Because even animals have brains. But this mind which Allah Ta'ala has given the human being differentiates between this human being and other beings of life. And Allah Ta'ala blesses that aql, that mind to perceive, receive ilm and knowledge from Allah Ta'ala. That knowledge is the gateway to learning about Allah and His creation. That knowledge is Allah's generosity. اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. That it is Allah's akramiyah, it is generosity, that He teaches the human being, He educates the human being, and He gives the human being knowledge of what he did not know. And through that knowledge, that human being acknowledges his creator. So that mind is a very magnificent part of the creation of the human being. And that mind, when it will collect and receive deen, religion, it will receive revelation, that is when that mind will reach its complete state. That is when that mind will develop completely. Otherwise, that human being which was created with a purpose, and everything which is created with a purpose, when it no longer lives to serve that purpose, then it is as if it doesn't exist. What's the point of it? So that human being which was created to acknowledge Allah Ta'ala and then worship Allah Ta'ala, when it loses that purpose, then it no longer remains in the category of the human being. Allah Ta'ala, when speaking of the human creation, He said, عَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنِ الرَّحْمَنُ عَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنِ خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانِ عَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانِ. Allah Ta'ala started by speaking of the human creation by first speaking of revelation, by first speaking of deen, by first speaking of Qur'an. When that human being receives the Qur'an, when it learns the Qur'an, when it practices the Qur'an, then it develops, then it becomes the human. Then it becomes the human. Otherwise, it doesn't remain a human. It doesn't remain a human. The first step to humanism is receiving the revelation, is receiving the Qur'an, and fostering that Qur'an, and taking care of that Qur'an. Then the human being, Allah Ta'ala teaches its speech, gives it education. And even that, then it will rely and be dependent upon his knowledge of the reality of things, and the reality of things lies within the knowledge which Allah has given you. So عَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانِ. Now his bayan, his speech, his perception of the world, if it's in line with the sharia, if it's in line with the shara', with deen, with religion, then that mind will cultivate. That mind will survive. That mind will remain to be deserving to be called a human. Deserving to be called a human. But when the human being in the perception of the people will just become a body of biology and a biological specimen and a servant of its desire, then that higher level of morality will die. That higher level of morality will die. And this is what the ulama mention when they speak that the human beings were created with both a higher soul and a lower self. A higher soul and a lower self. The higher soul consists of the ruh, of the soul. It consists of the mind, of the aql, of the intellect. When that train will be driven, then that human being will become what? He will become very special. He will become very special. And he will not only become a part of the successful human community, but a part of the community of the angels who worship Allah Ta'ala, that do not know innate desire, do not have a biology. Why? Because they're created from light. They're created from nur. And all they know is intellect. All they know is knowledge. All they know is worship of Allah Ta'ala. But when that human being, his innate desire, his biology, that overcomes an intellectual bias, then what will happen? That human being falls from the category of being human. Right? And then the heart of the human being sickens. The heart of the human being sickens, and we're not talking about the biological heart, we're talking about the heart of a human being which receives spiritual effect and which receives intellectual effect and is the locus of human creativity. It is the locus of human health. That heart, when it sickens, then things which do not rationally make any sense will start to make sense to the human being. Things which do not make sense will start to make sense with the human being. Why am I mentioning this? Because the human being up till the modern age has always not only fostered his biological side of the five senses and has nurtured the knowledge received through those doors, but has also had a sixth sense. A sense of religiosity, a sense of deen, a sense of God owning the human being, and God and the Lord commanding the human being, and that those commands are by which the human being has to drive his life, and that what the Lord has governed to be impermissible, that human being will forbid himself from it. But we live in an age of modernity, right? And when we're speaking about modernity, we're not speaking of the context of the present necessarily, right? Or we're not speaking of necessarily technology. A person can live in a cave and be very well a modern person and a modernized person. The concept of modernity, my brothers and sisters, is a family of philosophies which has brewed within the European society since the past few hundred years. And it is the product of a list of not only events, but circumstances which took place within the European society, which has led mankind to a type of atheism which has never been seen before. That the human being doesn't care to learn about why he or she was created. That the human being doesn't care about the philosophy of life. That the human being doesn't care of why he or she was created and for what purpose are they to live on the face of this earth. A European philosopher himself says, by the name Jude, in a University of London, that the dilemma of modern society is different than the dilemma which human beings fell in before. Before, when human beings had questions, they tried to answer those questions and they nurtured certain philosophies. And when they couldn't answer those questions, it was just a simple failure of answering the question. But the dilemma of the modern human being is that he fails to even give attention to those questions to begin with. To give attention to a God to begin with. To try to rationally understand. And we, my brothers and sisters, as Muslims, we differ from other religions in why we believe in a creator. We don't carry blind faith within a creator. Right? We as Muslims have come to a logical conclusion, and through rationality we understand that Allah Ta'ala is there. that Allah Ta'ala has created everything. This is the rational belief of a Muslim. And rather it is irrational to disbelieve in God. It is irrational to disbelieve in God. But when, and this isn't to blame any discipline, but when the study of science was born, what type of context and society was it born within? Was science never studied by the Muslims before the modern time? Was mathematics never studied by the Muslims within the modern time, before the modern time? The Muslims have always studied these sciences. If atheism lied within these sciences, then Muslims would have never studied it. But Muslims contributed to these sciences. But what cooked within the European modern society was that there was a revolt against religiosity. There was a rebellion against the idea of a supreme being and a supreme power. And there are many events which highlight this. You can keep in mind the historical event of the French Revolution, in which the Christian clergy had taken sides with the high class and the aristocrats. And the peasants, people who don't have a voice, they're being forced to pay taxes which were not just. And one thing about the human being, whether he believes or he disbelieves, is that the human being by his innate nature dislikes injustice. The human being dislikes injustice. And when this revolt cooked within the human beings, then a rebellion towards religiosity grew. And it was in that context that study of materialism grew. Study of materialism nurtured. And then in that context, that to prove any side of knowledge, to prove anything to be true, you need to have seen it, you need to have touched it, you need to have smelled it. When this is, even if you go back to the ideas of Greek philosophers, was not the only door of knowledge. Rather, human society thrived on rationality, on rational knowledge. And that knowledge received through the doors of the senses was not the only knowledge. This is why definitely for the most part in modern universities, when people are asked to prove in God, what do they say? What do they ask? Show me Him. Show me Him. But Islamic creed tells us that Allah Ta'ala Himself told us that God is not to be seen by the eyes. God is not to be perceived by empirical means, but rather rational means and spiritual means. And so the rationality which the human being, the Muslim holds on to, is that حَاجَةُ كُلِّ مَخْلُوقٍ إِلَى صَانِعِهِ, the proof of the existence of our Lord, which is that it is the necessity of every created thing, the necessity of every created thing towards a creator. Towards a creator. That nothing, existence cannot come out of nothing. Right? Everyone believes in a system of causes and effects. The problem is when the human being limits those causes and effects to materialistic means, to a material context. And so the Muslims believe in this, that Allah Ta'ala created everything, and that He Himself doesn't have a before. He Himself doesn't have a before. God is excluded from that context of being created. Why? Because God doesn't come in the flesh and the blood of His creation. God cannot be a part of time and space. Because if a thing, something greater cannot be a part of its part, it's rationally proven, right? That if something is small and you have the greater part of it, the greater part is not smaller than the part of it. The greater is greater than the part of it. Allah Ta'ala is greater than His creation. This is why the context of time, that question in and of itself is ended from the beginning when you understand that time is a creation of Allah. Then you can't ask, because if time is a creation of Allah, then asking what is before Allah doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So Muslims come to know of the existence of Allah Ta'ala rationally, my brothers and sisters. Don't think it's a dogmatic belief. It's not a dogmatic belief. we rationally come to the conclusion that Allah Ta'ala exists. When atheists, and this is a very important topic, my brothers and sisters. When atheists before tried to debate Muslims and scholars within the past, an example that comes to mind is that once the great scholar Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, in Baghdad, when an atheist had called him to debate, he came late to the debate. He came late to the debate. And the Muslims and the king of Baghdad, everyone who represents Islam now, everyone's angry that, you're representing the Muslims and you're not even holding on to common courtesy and common ethics. You're coming late. So this atheist debater starts to get angry and frustrated, and he asks Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah that, why are you late? What has caused you to be late? So he says that when I was on my journey here, and I had to cross a body of water, there was no boat that I could come onto. So I start to pace back and forth thinking that, how am I going to be on time to this debate? The Muslims are going to be disgraced. When all of a sudden, I saw pieces of wood come together, and I saw the parts of a boat come into a perfect shape. And then I came onto that boat and I came here. Now this atheist is even more frustrated that not only have you wasted my time, but you're telling me folktale. You're telling me fiction stories. And so Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah right there says to him that if you don't believe that a simple boat in a vehicle of my transportation couldn't come together by nothing, then how are you going to claim that this whole world and its system and perfection came together from nothing? And the debate ends right there. The debate ends right there. This was the logical foundation and the rational foundation when Muslims thought, and they used their intellect by pondering upon Allah Ta'ala's word, that they came to full conviction that Allah Ta'ala exists, and that Allah Ta'ala destines the events which take place within the world, and that everything will return to Allah Ta'ala. And so my brothers and sisters, it's important to analyze the modern sickness, which is a cancerous disease spreading within society. And it's not but this sickness which we are calling atheism. It's not but kufr, it's disbelief. And why is this disbelief coming? Because belief has been placed within the material world. Because belief has been placed within the physicality of things. And that to believe in the physicality of things is full conviction. And without that conviction, there is no full conviction. This is important. And this is spoken to us within the Quran. You take, for example, Surah Al-Kahf. Right? Surah Al-Kahf is supposed to be recited as a protection from what? The fitna of Dajjal. The fitna of Dajjal. Who is Dajjal? What is Dajjal? Dajjal is what? He's trickery. He is the idea and the ideology of kufr battling iman. Because the human being is always going to adopt an ideology. Remember this. The human being is an ideology fostering creature. The human being will always adopt an ideology. It will either be an idea of belief or an idea of kufr. And the only people who are worse than the people who adopt the belief of kufr by their own will are the people who adopt the belief of kufr without choice and blindly following the people of kufr. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ said that you will follow the people before you. You will follow the people before you, the people of kufr, the people of disbelief. And you will follow them in such a manner that inch by inch you will follow them. And you will follow them in a manner that if those people were to drive themselves into a hole, you would follow right behind them. Now the people who choose to go into that hole, are they in a bigger loss, or the people who followed them dogmatically? The people who didn't even open their eyes to see, am I following the right thing or not? Who's in a greater loss? So mankind, which is falling into this idea of materialistic flourishment, that it is through material that the human being will flourish. This is why a professor from from the UK, he also mentions this, that the ideology which the human being is carrying, it links back to a Greek philosopher by the name Epicurus, who used to believe that there is no hereafter, there is no God, and that there is nothing but what the human being can test by physicality, by material, by imperialism. Those are the things which the human being can find as true knowledge. And that the idea of the human being now is not an idea of anything besides economy. Whatever is pleasing the stomach of the human being, filling the stomach of the human being is a servant of that cause. The human being becomes a servant of that cause. And so Allah Ta'ala tells us of the story, and I conclude shortly expressing the story, of two people in Surah Al-Kahf. A person who owns two gardens. And this person boasts about his gardens. And so you see it to be a battle between material and a battle between iman, between faith. This person, he boasts and he attributes his material to nothing beyond what he can see. What can he see? He can see himself, right? That's why there's even a deconstruction of the self nowadays. That be yourself, the modern paradox, be yourself, serve yourself. And the human being is now deconstructing that idea so much that even the self is lost. Even the self is lost. What is the self? And so this human being, this is why my brothers and sisters, the idea of modernity is not something which is exclusive to technology or exclusive to science. The idea of modernity is something which stems from kufr. It stems from disbelief. That I am myself, I rule and nothing rules above me. And that I know better than the people before me know. I know better than the people before me know. So this person, an owner of two gardens, he says that I own these two gardens and it is because of me, ana a'azzu. I own these two gardens, and he says to his companion who's a believer that I own more wealth than you and I am more honorable than you. It's all going back to what? The ana, the self, which is the cause of kufr. The self is the cause of disbelief. The cause of disbelief is when a person just cannot fathom the fact that there is a supreme being governing him. That there is a supreme being governing him. And that person wants to believe that I control everything. Wants to believe that everything is in my hand. This is what the self drives a person to. This is what the lower self and the desire of the human drives that person to. And so the person of Iman says, are you going to disbelieve in the person who has created you? It's the same question which is raised between believers and disbelievers today. Are you going to disbelieve in the one who created you by not attributing any of your technology, any of your science to the one who created everything? To the being whom from everything exists? And he says, as for me myself, I will hold on to my doctrine of belief. لَكِنَّهُ اللَّهُ رَبِّي. That as for me, He is my Lord. He has surely created me and He sustains me. He sustains me. The Muslims have to hold on to this belief in the modern age. That Allah Ta'ala created them and Allah Ta'ala created everything. And why don't you, O disbeliever, when you enter your gardens, when you enter your technology, when you enter your high buildings, when you enter this perfect state which you seem to believe that you created with your own hands, when you enter this state, why don't you attribute it to Allah Ta'ala and say that all praise be to Allah Ta'ala, and that all power resides by Allah Ta'ala, and that this is nothing but the will of Allah and the decree of God. And that how do you not know that by fate, if Allah will dictate, the one who gave you this wealth to begin with, that if tomorrow that He take everything from you, He take everything from you, and that I be tomorrow someone more wealthy than you, someone of more material than you. And so then he answers in arrogance, right? Arrogance is the mother of this kufr, of this disbelief. He answers in arrogance and he says that even if such a circumstance were to happen, the hour were to come upon people, everything were to be destroyed, I am self-entitled. I'm self-entitled. And if there is to be a creator, that creator will do good by me because I'm a good person. I'm entitled to goodness. And so then when this person's gardens are taken from him, and he's tested in his trial, then he falls into his hands within regret. And he says that, why did I assign any partner to Allah Ta'ala? How could I assign partner to Allah Ta'ala, the one who created everything? This is, my brothers and sisters, the battle between materialism and the battle between Iman. The battle between materialism and the battle between Iman. And the Muslims have to awaken to this. This is a very serious sickness. Right? Because it's finding a way through a means. It's finding a way that through this wealth, that people will levitate and raise the wealth and the material in such a manner that it will take the place of a creator, and they will not even notice, and they would have disbelieved. Before, in the past, if you disbelieved and you raised a statue, it's quite clear. But this disbelief, it is the plot of Dajjal. This is Dajjal. This is Dajjal. To make something wrong look right. And to make it, perfect within society. And to beautify wrong in such a way that it will be right in front of the people. This is the test of modern society, my brothers and sisters. And this atheism is such a sickness which is coming not only in the hearts of, not only people who are nurtured within this society, but within, you see many adults who are harvesting this sickness within themselves. And it's important that this sickness be taken out of the hearts. And the only one way is what? Learn your deen. Learn your religion. Learn your deen. Ilm is the only, what we started with, right? Ilm is the only thing which will give flourishment to the intellect. Otherwise, the intellect will go down the wrong path, and everything which is wrong will seem right to that intellect. Because it's not nourished by the right means, the means of revelation, the means of deen, the means of religiosity. And then that sixth sense which is dying today, that sixth sense of religiosity, which the European society was and is trying to take out. That out of the system, God be taken out of the system. Right? God be taken out of the system. You have events like the separation of church and state and other events which highlight this completely. That God be taken out of the system, and in such a way that people will not even notice it. People will not even notice it. So my brothers and sisters, we have to pay heed to the message of the Qur'an, raise our intellect through the Sharia, and learn our deen. Learn our deen intellectually, spiritually, rationally. And it is through those means that we will have full conviction in our deen, and nothing will then be able to shake the iman and the conviction of the believer. We ask Allah Ta'ala that He strengthen our belief, and that He protect the believers of our time from this sickness, from this cancerous sickness, and that He guide the people of disbelief to belief. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. عباد الله، إن الله قد أمركم بأمر بدأ فيه بنفسه وثنى به الملائكة المسبحة بقدسه وثلث بكم أيها المؤمنون حيث قال إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد بعدد من صلى وصام. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد بعدد من قعد وقام. وصل على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى الملائكة المقربين وعلى عباد الله الصالحين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. ولذكر الله تعالى أعلى وأولى وأعز وأجل وأتم وأهم وأكبر. أقيم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قال رب إني دعوت قومي ليلا ونهارا فلم يزدهم دعائي إلا فرارا وإني كلما دعوتهم لتغفر لهم جعلوا أصابعهم في آذانهم واستغشوا ثيابهم وأصروا واستكبروا استكبارا ثم إني دعوتهم جهارا ثم إني أعلنت لهم وأسررت لهم إسرارا فقلت استغفروا ربكم إنه كان غفارا. الله أكبر.